We're not the favourites. We're not going to be within the big hitters. We're not in England. We're not France, Germany, Spain, where expectations upon those guys is to go deep and potentially win it. With us, we're a bit of an unknown quantity. We've got some really good players that play in Europe, clubs know about, but we've got some really good players that maybe are not on the tip of everyone's tongues. If we could get out of the group, that would be a major achievement. We're not there to be tourists. We're there to compete. We're here to win.
David, thank you so much for joining us. I've been looking forward to this. Welcome to the Business of Sport.
Thank you, pleasure.
There's obviously one main thing that we will be talking about quite a lot throughout this conversation, and that is the incredible qualification of Georgia to this summer's European Championships and your part to play in that. But before we dive into that, I would love to know a little bit about your background and how you came to be the assistant manager of Georgia.
I've been in football now for about 20 years. I was a young player at Crystal Palace, but didn't make it through to the first team. I've had various roles in football, from all the way through to academy coach, head of scouting roles, sporting director roles. But coaching's always been my real passion. Working with people, working with players. Sort of the last 2-3 years of my career has gone more into the coaching side of things. Sort of moved away from the scouting, sporting director side of things, more into that. And I suppose how Georgia become about is quite a unique one, because I met the head coach, Willy Sagnol, about 10 years ago. And we met on a scouting trip when he was the technical director of the French Federation, I believe. And I think I was at Bournemouth at the time as head of recruitment. So it was just sort of a kind of a random meet. And we kept in contact, exchanged numbers. You know, he speaks really good English. His wife's English. So no issue with the language there. And then we just stayed in contact. And when he came over to London, we met for lunch. And when you chat football, when you chat people, and you've got a real energy and synergy with someone, you kind of think, oh, this is quite nice. So we kept in contact. And then after a brief spell at York City as manager, he sort of said to me, look, David, we're going to have, look at our sort of coaching setup within the Georgia national team. Would you be interested in sort of like an assistant coach type of role, which would consist of on-field coaching, but also something that really appealed to me was working on the sort of mental performance of the players as well. So it was like sort of fusing two roles together, really. So I thought this could be quite interesting. So,
and that kind of feeds into your passion, right, as well, which is more than just...
Football's such a unique sport, and there's so much data involved now, there's so much sports science involved, and the psychology of it and the character side of it of players has always been sort of a real sort of fascination for me. How players tick, what motivates them, how can you get into them, how can you bond the team together, how can you get high performance results. But I think stripping them back from players, I've always tried to look at them as people first, get to know them as people, and then once you've got that layer sort of underpinned, then you can start getting into more the performance side of things. Because I think once you know a person first, then you can really get sort of underneath them and then sort of isolate sort of key points, what can make them tick, and go on to sort of, try and get results.
What was the work that went into that decision from your side when you had the opportunity presented to you? Did you go away and look at the kind of performance side from the squad's perspective and the types of players they had in there and how you felt you could add real value? Because I'd imagine from that side, it was more than just who's a good player, who's not a good player. How did you prepare for that?
I did my research and due diligence. So I did a lot on sort of Georgia, the country, the history of the country, the background. I see they'd never qualified for a major tournament. I looked at their sort of current squads, sort of recent results. I always do like a checklist when I'm going to make a decision on thinking, how's it going to benefit me in terms of my career? What am I going to learn from it? What am I going to gain from it? The people I'm working with. So once I fuse all this together, it's sort of a tick cross, tick cross, tick cross. And I thought, actually, this is a really exciting project. I knew we had the qualification phases still to play within the Euro groups, but I also knew we had the playoffs as well. So I thought this could be really exciting to be part of something that a country that's going to get into the Euros have never qualified for a major tournament. So that was a major appeal for me.
People may not know, and so for those that are coming to this and want to understand the context, what was the moment you came in then with Willy Sagnol and started taking over? And was it towards the end of the qualifying phase and then the playoffs?
Yeah, so that came about August last year, so August 23. We'd had conversations for a couple of months sort of previous, just sort of backwards and forwards, how the role would work, what would be my role within the team, how the team is, his playing philosophy, his style, and sort of fusing that all together. So I came in for the last sort of 6 games of qualification. A tough group we had in the Euros as well. So we had Spain, we had Norway, we had Scotland. But I think we always had in mind that was going to be a tough qualifying group to qualify automatically, that the playoffs was our real sort of focus within that.
And how did the playoffs manifest themselves? Because this is where it gets really interesting. Really interesting.
Yeah, I suppose in a way what we wanted to do, because the expectations of the country was so big.
Were they? Okay, so even though they hadn't qualified, there was enough like from the team.
Yeah, that they would, because I think over the last 3 years they'd won their UEFA Nations League group. They'd been on this upward trajectory, and they went for a period where they hadn't lost in quite a few period of games. So from when Willy first started in 2021, they started off here, for example, and then they've sort of, climbed the mountain a little bit. So expectations become a lot more. So what we wanted to do when it comes to the playoffs was my role was to, this is where it became sort of quite useful, was to get the group more focused, more calm, more relaxed. So obviously there's loads of excitement from the media, from the press, from the Georgian press, from outside, but within the camp we developed this real strength of like unity, calmness, togetherness, like a stillness really. And I think that really helped us going into that, because the games were in Georgia, so obviously there was a lot of pressure on that, and we just wanted the players to feel, okay, it's another game, it's a process. Luxembourg first, we'll take them. We'll do all our due diligence and do our research in how they play, what's their strengths and weaknesses, and how we're going to overcome that, and what's our strengths and weaknesses. But then I think within that really helped us, like going into these games, because the players automatically relaxed. We didn't feel the pressure as much, even though the expectations were so huge.
And the stadium there is quite impressive, isn't it? I mean, it's 55,000 seats.
It's phenomenal.
You get an atmosphere.
Yeah, I've travelled quite a lot in football, and I've never been in an atmosphere like that in my life. No, it was insane.
And I mean, you really get a feel for what football can do in those moments, right? When you see a country so unified behind something, and then when it actually achieves, when it hits that moment of we're going to our first major tournament, that must have been an incredible thing to be a part of.
It was unbelievable, because you felt, even before the game, the team was quite relaxed going into it, fully focused, but you go out, sort of do your warm-ups with the team before the game, and you can really feel the energy in the stadium. You can feel the passion from the supporters, you can feel the energy, and it was just like, we've actually got a 12th player. We've got a 12th man in our corner. We sort of felt this is our time, because if we, because they've been to the playoffs, I think previously, and they hadn't got through in Georgia, but this time it just felt so different. And it was just like a calming feeling come over the players to think, well, we've got a whole nation in our corner.
And this is something I'm always intrigued by with international football in particular, where you have these massively high stakes, then you have a group of players, some who are playing top level. You have a Ballon d'Or nominated player in the Georgia team, and apologise for any pronunciation, but if you've got Vicha Kvaratskhelia playing for Napoli, Champions League football, and kind of top of BBC Sports gossip column every other week, alongside players that are coming from domestic leagues who never experienced this type of pressure and atmosphere. How do you, as a management group, manage those personalities and the difference in those experiences between your players?
I think what's unique with Georgia is you've got, within the squad, you've got groups within groups. You've got the senior players who have played together for X amount of games. Then you've got a middle group of players with sort of the 24 to 28-year-olds have all come through the youth categories as well. And then you've got a lot of younger players coming through. So you've got groups within groups, but they all seem to bond together. Because it's my first experience of a national team, I've never seen such unity within a team. So even though sometimes you see within the sort of football dressing room there be sort of certain friendships and groups that stay together, with this one, everyone to everyone, and this is what makes it really special, because you've got generational mixes, senior players, younger players coming through, and the senior players really help the younger players. So and they all feel this sense of pride and passion. And I don't know, it's like they have a real emotional attachment to their national team, and it's very difficult to describe. So it's like they're all there to do all there to do the best for their team, but they just automatically, when the younger players come in, they just sort of slide in because they know we've got our leadership group that will integrate them well. We've got our coaching team that will integrate them well. It's just more for the younger players. And it's just, we've got such a strong team unity. And I think that really helps.
Yeah. And so the handling of pressure is actually something that just comes with that, you'd say,
yes.
Where because they understand the values and the importance of play, it almost comes as part of if they're in the team.
Yeah.
We're a part of it.
Yeah, part of it. And sort of part of my role within that as well is that I do some presentations on sort of maybe isolated points of, like in each camp I've done something different. So one I've done presentation on pressure, on focus, on winning mentality, on staying calm. And these are just little bits just to feed into, because sometimes within the group it is those little small bits of detail, especially when it comes to those big pressure moments, because it is a very talented group of players that can really sort of bring that level of calm back down.
Yeah.
And by sort of part of my role is also to get to know the players one-to-ones. I do a lot of one-to-ones with the players throughout the camps as well.
And what kind of stuff do you do in those one-to-ones? You know, is it, I want to know about your family. I want to know what you like, what your hobbies are.
Yeah. So we very rarely, we touch on football, we touch on their journeys, their current clubs and, stuff like that. But getting to know them as people, family, what motivates them, what their ambitions are, their children, what they like, what they dislike. Because I think once you get to know them as people, you can really start to sort of bond together, the group, and then you can know how to motivate them individually, but also you get a collective things. Okay, this is going to work here, this is not going to work here, because each team, this national team will be different if it was in England or Scotland or France, for example. So I think to get to know them as people, get to know the culture, get to know the group values. When you understand this, then you can start really bonding them together.
Culturally, has there been anything that you've really learnt, I guess, being an Englishman in Georgia?
Yeah. It's very different. I would say that the people there, they're quite sensitive people. And I think maybe their sort of the history of the country as well, coming from where it is, being part of Russia previously and stuff, they're very much, you want them sometimes to do, ask more questions, to get involved. They're very much, if you say something, they will do it in terms of the coaching, which is great from a coach's point of view, but sometimes you do want that little bit more feedback. So when I say they're sensitive, you have to, I suppose they want to get to know you more, and then they will come out their shell more. Once they come out their shell more in terms of the players, then you can really get more out of them. So this is why the one-to-ones and the small group and the big group stuff was really, really important.
What about the kind of preparation now? You achieve qualification, but then you have the few months apart where everyone goes back. The thing that's always fascinated me about international football is, what does Gareth Southgate do outside of the training camps?
Yeah.
What does your preparation look like when you're not in that 2 to 3 week camp with the team?
Obviously, they're quite intense, the camps. So the first 3 or 4 days when you go back home is relax, because it's quite an intense camp. And then you start to look at, for my role, we start to look at up and coming opponents. So we've done a lot of preparation work with the in-house analysis team of the Georgian Federation, of breaking down strengths and weaknesses of our up-and-coming opponents. Also, a lot of scouting at our own players, making sure they're keeping fit, making sure they're on top of their performance. A lot of sort of contact within that as well. So it's that side of things I think is really, really key, because when you're in a club, obviously it's 24/7. It's game after game after game after game. We're here. You can spend a lot of time and a lot of detail on your opponents, like beforehand as well. Obviously, we don't want to go too much overload, but because we've got a really specific way of working, so it's really homing on those details for the sort of next, so between camps, 3-4 weeks, then checking in on our own players as well. So those are the two sort of main things that we do within camps. Do
you and the management have a weekly kind of like check-up, chat, a booked-in time just to see how everyone's
we always check in, I would say, sort of every sort of 7 to 10 days, and then that increases as we get closer as well. When we start the preparation, if any players have picked up any injuries, who's informed. There might have been players that particularly have become interesting. Younger players might have come through that we might want to bring into the camps and stuff. More talks about the detail, the preparation, and obviously with this one being the Euros, there's a lot of prep work as well. So where our base is going to be in Germany, our warm-up games.
How does that work?
So along with the federation, sort of Willy Sagnol, the head coach, and sort of our federation have already got out to Dusseldorf, and they've done this within sort of the first week because using his experience being a former international player, we wanted the hotel to be just outside the city. It stops distractions really. So we'd have the hotel to ourselves. 10-15 minutes away. It's enough for us to be focused. It's enough for us not to have distractions, and that's when he comes into play of playing in big tournaments like World Cups and European Cups, that he can really get that sense of what might work for our particular group of players.
What's it like with the kind of, I guess, that business side, from the budgeting perspective of a tournament then? Does that come from you absorb the cost of the hotels, the training camps? Is it given to you by, in this case, UEFA? How does that work?
I know UEFA give a set amount. I know there's set sponsors, and I know there's been a couple of particular investors that have put into that as well. So,
but is it like, do France and England get a better facility than Georgia, or is it equal playing?
I think you get more on the rankings. You get more on the rankings as well, but obviously there is a pool of money that goes around to the teams as well. So there is a set amount to allow. I think it's allowed to sort of a good preparation. There'll be a set amount from UEFA, and then there'll be additional funding either from the country, either from sponsors, investors that come in as well. Obviously England, France, Germany will obviously get millions of pounds worth of investors, but we will get a good amount. So I think that would definitely help with our preparation.
So when do you go out?
I go out on Friday, the 24th of May.
I mean, that's a good 2.5-3 weeks before kickoff. And
you're starting to get into your head into that sort of mode where it's, right, this is coming up to game time now. This is coming up to serious time. And I think for me, it's always good to have 3 or 4 days in there before we start camp, because it's kind of a period where we have the coaching team together, all the United States team. We just do the final checks and all our preparation and stuff as well. And then you get a couple of days just to integrate into the city a little bit, integrate into the culture because once you're locked into camp, it's, they're sort of 12, 40 nowadays.
Because you've got Portugal, Czech Republic, Turkey.
Yeah.
So some great games.
Great games.
Where are you playing? Are you moving around some big stadiums?
Yeah, so our first one is in Dortmund.
Oh,
phenomenal, like 80,000. Yeah, it's incredible. I suppose it's a little bit of a disadvantage for us because you got a Turkish contingent out there in that particular area. And then we go to Hamburg for our second game, and then the third game sort of back in that region at Schalke Stadium.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Do you know how many fans are expected from Georgia? Is there a massive travelling contingent?
Yeah, there will be. Yeah, there will be. I'm not sure of the amounts, but we know that the demand for tickets, just from speaking to our sort of team manager that organises that, he said it's gone through the roof. It's just gone mental.
Oh, I can imagine.
Yeah,
but I mean, it will be amazing. It will be an absolutely incredible experience, I'd imagine, for you. What Rudi Völler said about you and Bayer Leverkusen, and kind of the joke almost around the surprise of Englishman looking at something in the detail you were, rather than just a physicality.
Yeah.
Was this a really unique approach when you were going just that little bit further beyond the actual talent to look at these people? I
think I've always been fascinated with psychology, and I wanted to fuse that together with football and sport. And at the time, when I went over to Leverkusen, it was originally on a study visit in 2008, 2009. There wasn't, sports science was just coming in, and I suppose England at the time, or English teams at the time, had this reputation of, direct football, long ball, and it was sort of globalised a little bit. We had this sort of stigma attached to us like that. When I was over in Leverkusen, he said, look, as part of your study visit, it was to get an academy manager's licence in the UK, so you had to do a European study visit. And he said, look, Rudi Völler said, look, you're not just going to come here and just look. You can be part of what we do. We're going to send you to a tournament with one of our under-21 sort of coaches. I didn't know nothing about German players or German football at the time in terms of the youth system. And he said, right, we're going to put you on a pitch. There's numbers of pitches all around this big area. So there was all these Dortmund, Schalke, Hamburg, Bayern Munich, all these under-16 sort of type teams. And he said, look, just pick out the best player you think is the best player. we will do the rest. You just pick out who you think's the best player on the pitch. Oh, okay, wow, so no pressure then. So we had this clipboard and I was like, he said, we're on pitch 4, for example, and he said, right, so I picked out, remember it was a central midfielder, and I was making my notes down. And we got back to the Leverkusen training base, and he said, right, all the scouts come in and coaches, and Rudy said, right, okay. So he went round to each of us and went, right, what did you find? So they was all speaking in German. We see this, we see this. He's like, David, what did you see? So I said, I see this player. He's a central midfield player. And I said, I started talking about his characteristics, what he was doing off the ball. I said, he's got good leadership qualities. His body language was good. He was communicating well. And he's like, stop. And I'm like, oh, shit. What? And he said, why are you saying all this? I said, I'm just saying what I see. And he said, yes, but you haven't spoken about his technical qualities. I said, any good scout can see talent, any good or understanding of a good understanding of football. I said, but for this level, I said, you want to see what character traits they have. If they're going to go into a professional environment, you're going to look at them as a potential player at this level. I said, so you've got to try and understand what the characteristics are, what they're doing off the ball. I said, these are key moments in the game. And he said, this is fascinating. He said, you sure you're English? And he said, we never had this conversation before. And I did a master's in sports psychology as well, because I really wanted to understand what makes players tick, what makes talent strive to be successful, what are the outliers, see if there's any trends, why are players becoming successful, why are players not becoming successful, which talent is coming through. And it was just becoming a whole sort of fascination to me.
That's an amazing skill to then have to apply to international football.
Yes.
You have that at a club,
yeah,
right? And yeah, you can do all of that, but at the end of the day, you probably have to go to a board and say, right, we've still then got to go and acquire the player. We've got to do all of that side of it. And you've got X amount of spots that you can probably do that for. In international football, you have a country's worth of talent, and you can call up anyone you want to a squad. So being able to apply that for you now must be kind of a fascinating shift from club to country. Or is it something you've really kind of enjoyed? Has it opened your eyes to a different side of the game?
It has, yeah, because I think in club level, when you're looking at club level, you're looking to maybe acquire the player at a cost. So he's going to cost the club X amount of money. So with that, there's, like you say, there's only so many positions they can buy. There's only so many budget you're allowed for that particular position. So it has to be sort of very, very precise in terms of the work that goes into that. Where international, there's none of that.
Yeah.
So it's just literally all about the team. It's all about the talent. It's which players. Obviously, they have to have a certain amount of quality to be a national team player, but also the character side and what they're going to bring to the dressing room is equally, is probably more, I'd say it's more important, but it becomes sort of key in those environments, because you're literally locked in camp for a 10-day period. So you want the right characters, you want the right personalities, you want the right people that are going to contribute to the group, not only from the playing side, but from the non-playing side as well.
So much over the last 10 years, let's say, give or take. It's as much about the individual, the star, as the team in sport. People follow players as much as they follow the club. From that management perspective, what's your relationship with that shift to ensure that you retain that whole kind of complete team mentality when you do have a bit of star quality in a dressing room that stands out?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, within this sort of setup, what was highlighted previously and what we've sort of done develop is now we have core values within the team. We have 5 core values which represent us as a team, us as Georgia. So, and every player that gets called up into the national squad or has been part of the national squad before all buy into this. It's something that was come up together within the group. So it's not just, because I think it's really important, but when you do this kind of stuff, it's the players have to buy into it. So the players have a say in this as well. So it's not just the coaching team and the management team say, right, these are the core values, because that might be ours. That might not be the players. And if you want them to buy in, it's got to be something together, especially when it's international, because there's different cultures. There's different things that will make them, which represent them as a country. Every player that comes within this setup buys into it. And I think you look at, you're saying the All Blacks mentality of...
have you read Legacy?
Yeah, sweeping the change rooms. We wanted to... There's sort of a... When they come into the group, it's sort of an automatic, right, this is us, this is Georgia, this is how we work, this is the way we want to play, this is our philosophies on the playing side, but these are our core values. This is who we are. This is our team. And this is what we need from you as an individual and a collective unit that's going to take us forward. Because without that, I don't think any team is as strong. I think once you've got that as well, and the whole players buy into it, and not only just the players, like the staff, the federation, because there's a big staff unit behind what we do as well. So it's literally everyone buys into the same thing.
Also, kind of, had that technical director, you've had the manager experience as well. I'm fascinated by the structures and the relationships within football and the people that work in and around clubs and countries now, and how all of these individual positions have become more important to the setup. Can you give a little bit of insight into how those work within footballing structures?
I think the sporting director or technical director role, whatever you frame it, depends on the club. It's become such an important role within a club now. The game has become so much more globalised. It's where before, maybe sort of 10, 15 years ago, you'd have like a CEO, an owner, a club manager, first team staff and a couple of scouts, and that would be it within a professional setup. But now I think it's a European adapted model that's come into this, especially within the Premier League and definitely the Championship, and even down to League One clubs now, they have these kind of roles. And when I did the role at Huddersfield back in 2019, it was the role had only been going for 2-3 years.
Was that when they were on their way?
They'd just come down from the Premier League.
Just come down from the Premier League.
Yeah. So, and it was kind of a role where it's like a structural role, but also you have the responsibility of, right, what are the club values? What's the club philosophy? What does it mean to represent, to be a part of this Huddersfield culture? So within my role, and each club works differently. You had, under my remit, you had the medical team, you had the analysis team, you had sports science, you had the scouting, you had the academy, and you also you had to work very closely with the head coach and to build the foundation for the future. So you had all these roles, and they all had to fuse together as one. So rather than a head coach or a manager having the responsibility of all these different roles, the technical director now becomes like an overview type role for all these ways to take the pressure off the head coach, and the head coach can just focus on results, performance, and the sporting director has the overview of all the different departments that feed into that as well.
Is there ever conflict between those two roles?
Not when I did it, but yeah, there can be. There can be as well, and it all depends how clubs are set up. The ideal relationship would be the sporting director and the head coach work like a house on fire. Sometimes it's not always the case, and it depends how they want to do. Especially, I think, when it comes to more recruitment roles, this is the kind of role.
I was going to say, because what you described there actually sounds like excellent delegation of responsibility the manager doesn't and shouldn't probably be across, because there's a huge amount of just management of all of that technical side. Yeah. If it's, I'm going to start telling you who you need to play in your team and these are the transfer targets, it can I'd imagine that's where the blurring of the boundaries happens.
It can be. I think sometimes for a sporting director you've got to have a very clear thing, right? I don't pick the team. That's the head coach's job, the manager's job. He's in charge of the team. There's no interference from that at all. That's his role. That's what he's employed to do. The recruitment aspect is because you have the scout and the analysis department that come under that comes under the sporting director. And the best way to do it is, in my experience, is you fuse the two together. So the head coach is always involved in that recruitment process of players. So you do contingency planning in advance. So when you come to the transfer window, if there's players you need in certain positions, or if players might be leaving the club, or other teams are looking to buy your players, then you start to work with the analysis and scouting team on particular scouting targets. But you also, for me, the best way to do it is you keep the head coach fully informed. So you have these conversations, you have these meetings with them and say, right, because at the end of the day, you can't just lump players into their team without them knowing, because now I'm on the coaching side. If I haven't got any information on that player and he's just coming into me, I'm well, what's going on here? For me, understanding the coaching side, you think, right, I want the coach to be fully informed so he knows the potential transfer targets, he knows what's coming into his team, he knows that potentially we might not get target 1, we might get target 2, and to try and feed him with that information as well so he can have a chance to watch the player himself, do his own homework. And it's a fully integrated process, because otherwise if the club just buys the player and the coach is not aware of what's going on without him knowing, it can sort of fracture, not only fracture that relationship, but it can also, it causes a little bit of disharmony within the setup as well. So the ideal setup from a sporting director is just, he has to be able to have that overview of everything, but also be able to fuse it all together. And obviously with a manager and a head coach, he has to play an integral role, especially in the recruitment process of players.
Is there a really good example at the moment, you think, of that being done really well?
I think one of the best ones that I've seen recently was Liverpool, having that set up as well, where they've got they had a sporting director, and they had sort of people within key roles within that as well. And I think sometimes with foreign coaches, when they come into the Premier League, they understand this process a lot better than maybe English coaches, because historically the sporting director or technical director role has been in Europe for quite a number of years. So when a European coach comes into the Premier League or the Championship, they understand their role within that. They know about, I'm here to coach, I'm here to improve the team, enhance the team, get results, where they understand that when it comes to recruiting players, they will have an input, but it won't be their final say. So I think teams like Liverpool have done it really well. Arsenal have done it really well. And again, it's having that, maybe because they have got overseas coaches in there that understand this. I think it definitely helps. But I think what's helping now is even roles like Newcastle. I've worked with Eddie, and he's come from that traditional mould of being the head coach and the manager. But now he's gone to Newcastle as a technical director, and there's a whole support system around it. And I think he's really integrated into that as an English coach really well. And you can see that with some of the key signings and what they've done within that and the team performances.
Yeah, you've worked with some great people, right? Yeah. You've got Eddie Howe, worked with Pochettino. I'm a Chelsea fan, so I'm fascinated. But, it pains me to say that I love the work he did with Spurs when he moved into that role was so interesting because of the team he did it with. Yeah. And, you had young players like your Dele Allis and Christian Eriksen's coming in and playing such an integral role. Were you around Tottenham when that kind of was happening? Yes. And what was that like to be a part of? I
think the advantage I had when I went to Tottenham, because I was previously head of recruitment at Bournemouth. We had a 2-year period between 2013 and 15. And then I was recruited by Tottenham to go into sort of a head of talent and development role. But prior to Bournemouth, I'd worked at Southampton in a scouting capacity. And Poch was there at the time, so I kind of understood how he played. Didn't really have too much access to him at Southampton, because I was kind of just like I had a leadership role, but not an integral one. But what I did understand was his philosophy, how he played, what type of players that he likes. So when we went to Tottenham, we had greater resource. We was in a competitive space of getting to the top 4, and we did really well within that period. But Tottenham had a really good, unique scouting system. Is we always look for top talent rather than the ready-made product.
Yeah,
because we understand that Poch, he's like a teacher, so he could really work with these players. So we used to call them sort of like unpolished gems. So at the time when some players like Son come in, he was on the rise. Dele Alli come in, as you mentioned, he was on the rise. Kieran Trippier come through that. And Poch, he's a great coach, but he's also a great teacher and also like a really good person around human beings. He understands that. So with young, especially young players, he's really good.
It's going to be such an incredible, hopefully, month and a half. The Euros will bring a lot of excitement. What does success look like to you and the team as you walk into that tournament? It won't just be you're there to participate, right? You're there to win. So what does this now look like for you when thinking about achieving in the Euros this summer?
Yeah, we've had some discussions about this internally as well, because it's the first time we've qualified for a major tournament, and I think our head coach did a really good piece when he done for L'Equipe from the French magazine. They said we're not there to to be tourists. We're there to compete. We're here to win. We want to make a dent in the tournament. So success for us is obviously very different. Is to go as far as we can within the tournament. I think in one way the pressure is kind of off a little bit because we're not the favourites. We're not going to be within the big hitters. We're not in England. We're not France, Germany, Spain. Where expectations on those guys is to go deep and potentially win it. With us, there has been historical moments when Greece won it. For
I was going to say, do you take inspiration from things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think we're a bit of an unknown quantity within the group, within the tournament. We've got some really good players that play in Europe that clubs know about, but we've got some really good players that maybe are not on the tip of everyone's tongues, that we know their strengths and weaknesses within the group. So I think we're definitely going there to compete, and we will try and win as many games as possible. So success for us, if we could get out of the group, that would be amazing. That would be the first step, and then see who we got from there, and then try and progress on. But I think success for us, if we could get out of the group, that would be a major achievement.
Without giving away all the tactical secrets, what would you say to people watching? What can we expect from the team? What type of football do you look to play?
We like to play front foot, sort of attacking football, but we also try and play the opponent. So it's very different to club teams where you can understand of this team plays this certain way because they do it consistently over the course of the season. We can look at previous games of our opponents. This is where we're really good. We do have a lot of analysis on strengths and weaknesses of opponents to try and find weak points, little key moments that could turn the game for us. So we integrate our own philosophy of we want to play attacking football, we want to play transitional football, but we also understand the level of opponent we're playing as well. So there's certain types where you can't go high press against maybe one of the big teams because of their calibre of players, and we don't want to get caught. So we might have a different tactic for that particular game. So the philosophy is always the same, but the dynamics and how we set up might be slightly different, just depending on the opponent.
Look, David, it's been amazing to have you in. I really appreciate you carving out the time. It's an incredible achievement that you've managed to kind of nail down already, and I wish you all the best for this summer's tournament, and we'll be watching for sure.
Thank you for having me.